forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just sucked the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
And greetings. Welcome to this week's episode of Bigger Ten. I am Steve Dace, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host but never partner, the one and only Aaron McIntyre. Good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Doing very well. It's that time of the year where if I'm not doing something with the family, it's 9:30 at night on a Friday or Saturday night. It is time for NCAA Football 14.
Nice. There you go. Well, if word is this is the last year we'll be playing that recycled version. So they're out hiring coders and programmers for the game. Have you seen that ad?
I did.
They are hiring people, and it looks like we got a trailer coming and maybe even a forthcoming release date of July of next year. So
Nice.
what that means is start looking for your PlayStation 5 now.
Good luck.
Because that's about how long it will take you to probably acquire one. All right, because this will be a next-gen game. But yeah, I mean, we're post-Memorial Day. College football magazines are hitting the shelves. I have gone finally 21st century, the long-standing tradition since I was in high school of going to the bookstore and looking for the magazines. I just ordered them all online this year. I'll have them delivered to the house. So I should be getting my Athlons and Lindy's in the mail at some point this week.
At least you're getting magazines.
Yes.
Physical magazines.
Yes. And we are less than 90 days now. To the start of the 2022 college football season. The very first game, Dublin, Ireland, Northwestern against Nebraska to kick it off. Hopefully this week 0 goes better for the Huskers than last year's did against the Fighting Brett Bielemas. But let us begin the Big Five on Bigger Ten with some football talk, Aaron, shall we? A quiet little thing was noticed last week. The Big Ten Conference ended up scrubbing all of its future schedules beyond this season. Same thing happened with the websites of Big Ten universities. They just got retconned. Alan Haller, Michigan State's new AD, put out there that it looks like we're going to be scrapping the divisions. Then that was quickly taken back, like maybe he had spoken out of school. But as your lower third says right there, changes certainly seem to be coming. And it seems as if we are on the brink of any day now. You know, the Pac-12 already eliminated its divisions. It's going to a modified championship game this year. They're going to still have divisions in the schedule this year, but they're not going to pick the Pac-12 champion based on who wins the North and the South, but based on the two teams that have the best overall winning percentage in the league, and then they'll just get rid of divisions altogether in 2023. You, of course, know, Aaron, that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 tend to walk lockstep, arm in arm with one another on these sorts of matters. So could we be looking at you can smell the white smoke. It definitely seems as if a new day is dawning for Big Ten football here, and it's imminent.
Yeah, and I think it serves the conference well to make a decision, to make the right decision. And once you've come to that, whatever it is, get it out there as soon as you possibly can. And I think, to me, what seems to be the right decision right now is to, at the very least, scrap divisions. I think now, depending on what they have in that stead, it's not going to be equitable. Sorry, it's not going to be. It's not going to be what we are used to. That could be a good thing. That could be a bad thing. But I think at the end of the day, the product that you place on the field in December, what is the first Saturday or second Saturday in December, that's going to be improved by this. And you really are going to, I think it's going to feel more like two teams who really do deserve to be in that spot, playing in that spot. I hope it's not Michigan and Ohio State every single year. It's going to be Michigan and Ohio State every single year, but they're probably going to be the best teams in the league as well. So I think what complicates this, which is something that we're going to be talking about a little bit later, is what the other leagues do in terms of how big of a change is this? Because right now, with everything that's gone on in college football over the last year, Steve, and the poaching of Texas and Oklahoma, and the domino that just set off, you don't really have. I think a small change right now is just scrapping the divisions. Now, that would have seemed like a big deal 2 years ago, but that seems like a pretty small thing now. I think the scale of the changes that could come just all have to do with what other leagues decide to do and if they decide to partner up. Don't want to step on that topic yet. We'll get to that in a moment. But I think if it is the scrapping of divisions, still going to hold out all judgment until they determine actually how the schedules are going to be developed, which rivalries, if any, will be protected. There's going to be at least one rivalry protected. Will they do anything to really protect the others? Who knows? But I think it'll be interesting to watch nonetheless.
I don't think, and we discussed this, we did a show earlier this year where we looked at scrapping divisions and how things might have changed and who would have been the biggest winners and losers. And if you just look at the Harbaugh era, now the Harbaugh era took a noted upturn last year for Michigan. But if you look at, since he's been there, if you're worried it's going to be Michigan and Ohio State every single year, that actually would have only happened twice since he has been there. There would have been a Michigan-Ohio State rematch in 2018, and then there would have been a Michigan-Ohio State rematch last year. But even in 2016, there would not have been. You actually would have gotten an Ohio State-Penn State rematch, actually, that year. And then there's a couple of years where you would have gotten Michigan State-Ohio State rematches instead. So I don't know that it will be Michigan and Ohio State every year. I do think, and as a Michigan fan, I don't know how I feel now that we won that game again. I don't know. I mean, now that we won that game again.
What if that had happened this year?
Yeah, but then you got to turn around and play again the very next week.
Yeah.
Like, I would have loved our chances in 2018. We get cold smoked like that and come back for revenge the very next week. This past year, I don't know that I would have liked our chances that much because they've now got the chip on the shoulder, right? And there is something about that rivalry where you are forced to spend an entire year smarting about that, right? And taking your lumps for that. And then you can turn right around and undo it in a week. It's like it never happened. But as you pointed out, the schedules won't be equal, and that's because it's not about egalitarianism anymore. It's about we've got to get our best foot forward for resumes for the new expanded college football playoff. That's what this is really all about. And we don't want, last year maybe a 10-2 or 9-3 Iowa or Northwestern in the past couple of years stealing a potential playoff bid by pulling a one shining moment upset. We don't want that to happen, right? And instead, we want a team that might come in, maybe ranked on the bubble somewhere from getting in or getting to host a playoff game. We want them the chance to play the best opponent they can so that if they win, it boosts their overall profile rather than becomes forgettable. That's really what it's all about. If I had to guess what'll happen, I think, is some kind of protected rivalry system. And then it's just a matter of, is it 2 protected rivals or 3? I don't think the Big Ten will cut down to 8 conference games now. I think they'll stay at 9. I think the SEC will actually go to 9. Now, with the additions of Oklahoma and Texas. And I think what's being debated is, are we going to do a system that we've laid out where everybody gets 2 protected rivals and then you rotate everybody else? Or is it 3 protected rivals that you play every year and then rotate everybody else?
Who's Rutgers' protected rivals?
Well, that's the thing.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it should be 2 for everybody. I think it should be maybe 2 for some teams, 1 for some teams, 0 for other teams.
No, that's an interesting proposition. But then again, would it help Rutgers to have that? Would it help Rutgers and Maryland to build that up every single year within their own fan bases? Do you see what I'm saying? Would that be helpful to them in some respects? I don't know the answer to that. But I mean, some games obviously would be protected. The game will be protected, for example. And then there's plenty of others. Iowa, Wisconsin, that'll be protected. Purdue, Indiana is an obvious one to protect. But that's what I guess will likely happen as we move forward. And I think you'll see that starting as soon as next year, and we'll get that announcement here imminently. So let's take a look ahead to this season now. So last week here on the channel, on the Michigan podcast episode, I unveiled my 22 college football coaching power ratings, and we walked through that entire exhaustive metric of how I determine these, because I don't just rank them, by eyesight. There is a rating formula, and you can go back and watch last week's episode of Michigan podcast where I lay that all out. What are your thoughts on that formula, by the way? First and foremost, what do you think? Do you like the formula overall?
Overall, yeah. I'm kind of like Mark Rogers. There are some nits to pick, I think, but overall, I think it's a sound formula.
Okay. So for this year, here's where all the Big Ten coaches rank and in order this year. Jim Harbaugh comes at number 8, Ryan Day at number 10. Kirk Ferentz, 13th. Paul Chryst, 15th. Pat Fitzgerald, 16th. PJ Fleck at 20th. So the Big Ten had 6 of the top 20 coaches in the country. James Franklin, Brett Bielema, Mel Tucker, Jeff Brom, not that far behind. Neither's Greg Schiano. Tom Allen took a bit of a dip this year. I think he might have taken the largest dip of any Big Ten coach this year. Mel Tucker took the biggest climb. Mike Loxley at 50. Scott Frost is the caboose at 56. So this is what my metrics spit out for the ranking of Big Ten coaches heading into this fall, 1 through 14. Any umbrage, questions, comments, or insults with that list?
Not really. I think the two at the bottom probably have the chance to be the biggest movers this year. Mike Loxley and Scott Frost, as in moving out of their houses and somewhere else, because who knows if they'll actually make it out of this season. But seriously, I think PJ Fleck has a chance to, I think, bust into kind of the top 4 or 5 coaches. I mean, he's right on the outside there. James Franklin, I mean,
11 and 11 his last 2 seasons.
You're talking a notch above Brett Bielema, and you love you some Burt, but
yeah,
basically in terms of Big Ten echelon, he's just a notch above second-year coach for Illinois. That's a if you're a Penn State fan. Jeff Brom is a little bit lower than what I expected. That could just be my Iowa bias, being that he's had our number, and the rest of these. Not really anything that's too surprising. It's quite a gap there. I mean, it's 33 to 50. Those 2
right
at the bottom.
Yeah,
that's spacebar territory. But nothing super odd sticks out to me here.
All right, let's go back to the SEC then as we look at issue 3 for our Big 5 topics here this week on Bigger 10. The SEC is putting it out there with its media sycophants, of which there are legion.
Really?
Yes.
I hadn't noticed.
Yeah, indeed. They are putting it out there. They are considering just going ahead and doing their own playoff. Now, let me just tell you, as someone who works full-time in politics, they're not considering their own playoff. This is just all posturing, okay? And it's posturing because they're butthurt that the previous attempt to expand the college football playoff looked like it was a full go until they had successfully added Oklahoma and Texas to their ranks. And that caused the 3 new conference commissioners, including our own Kevin Warren, to say, yeah, we're going to get a TO, baby, on this and assess, which on our show, Aaron, we've been all for that. But we also recognize that the Big Ten is also posturing, right? There's going to be college football playoff expansion. It's probably going to look almost exactly like what was offered up last summer, except now there will be more and different television partners, and that'll be the end game of this. The end game will be that the Big Ten will bring some of its television partners, which are still being determined as we speak right now, but it will bring its television partners, whether that's just Fox or a Fox and a CBS or a Fox and an Amazon. It's going to bring them to market, so it's just not exclusively monopolized by ESPN this time. But the way the playoff itself is structured and how many teams, I think it'll look almost exactly like what was done before. So that was just posturing by the Big Ten, but we thought it would lead to some good effect. I don't think this does anything other than just posture. And frankly, if I'm the Big Ten, if I was Kevin Warren, I would have responded publicly to these reports and urged them to do it.
Yep.
Because we will make a crap ton even more money just playing ourselves. I mean, we would be, if we just went with an all-conference parochial schedule or played like one non-conference game against the Pac-12 for Rose Bowl relations and just took the Rose Bowl out of the playoff and went back to our old arrangement, all of our teams are making $70, $80 million a year if we do that. So by all means, if you guys, we don't have a playoff now, by the way, it's an invitational, and you can basically buy your team in. That's what the SEC does with the way they procure talent. So if I were Kevin Warren, man, I'd just say, you know what, man, get busy living or get busy dying. Go ahead, start your own playoff up. We'll do our own thing and have a nice life. We're going to cash the check nonetheless. Who needs you?
Why wouldn't you do this if you're the SEC? Why wouldn't you?
Because it goes against their ego. They want the ability to beat us in these playoffs and then chant SEC, SEC. So a bunch of Mississippi State fans can chant SEC, SEC, even though no one sells SEC chant gear. That's really what it's about, is they want the bragging rights. That's why.
I agree. The ego is a huge factor here. You already mentioned all their sycophants in the media. Who's going to have the stones to say the SEC is the disputed national championship? You can just get your talking heads to call it your SEC champion whatever the heck you want and not even give the Big Ten or any of the other conferences the time of day. Doesn't that actually serve your ego? The more I'm actually thinking through this, if I were the SEC, why not maybe try to make a play at like a, I don't know, Clemson, I don't know. There's another big team.
Okay.
And then go do your own interconference playoff and have your your sycophants in the media say, this is actually college football. This is this is the highest echelon of college football. The rest of these leagues are just feeder systems basically.
The other issue is ESPN. They own the SEC now, and the last thing those Yankee libs over there in Connecticut want is to own a Southern regional parochial circle jerk. And the value of that investment goes down if it's not seen as a national brand, meaning it's just bigger money version of what the SEC was when I was a kid, before you were born, other than like when Herschel Walker was around. Other than that, for much of the 80s and 90s, you had the Herschel Walker era, and then you had the Alabama team in 92, really until the invention of the SEC championship game. The SEC was basically the Jefferson Pilot game on your cable system, and it was the Ron Franklin game at night. But often their teams weren't winning national championships. It was a largely regional, parochial obsession by the people down there. I mean, I love college football, and I love SEC football, by the way. Don't get me wrong. I friggin' love it, okay? Love watching it. I love everything about it. I love the drama, the soap opera. I bet it's so damn fun being a sports talk show host in the SEC with all the drama you get all the time, okay? But looking at this from a Big Ten perspective, okay, cool. Dude, we got, all the major northern media markets. Have a nice life down there. Enjoy in dominating Birmingham, Alabama TV. Good for you. And, have a nice life. We'll be good up here. We're fine. I mean, it would devalue ESPN's investment for it to become regionalized and parochial and not nationalized. And ESPN's not a regional company. They're not Jefferson Pilot.
Yeah, I don't have a comeback for that. I would just say, though, if ESPN were not in the picture, there's no reason why they couldn't do this.
Agreed. And maybe then they would, actually, if they were still... I by the way, I also think it'd be tons of fun to watch, frankly. It'd be a lot of great football, right? But from a national perspective, we don't really need them on any level whatsoever. Let's go to it's not quite final. Guys can still transfer into schools, but now you have to be in the portal as of May 1. You have to be in the portal in order to be immediately eligible this year. So as of right now, here's the current Big Ten football transfer tally for this offseason in alphabetical order. You can see the players that were brought in and the players that were brought out. Not surprisingly, your Hawkeyes have the most stability and consistency. Only brought in one player, only lost 6. Michigan, for a team that is bringing a lot back and won a championship,
that's pretty good.
That's pretty good in terms of retention there, no doubt about it. You look at the amount of guys that transferred out of Ohio State, and now, we got some pushback from my team total talent ratings. When you see the fact they lost 20 guys to transfer, can you see, and dude, they're still like the 7th most talented roster in the country, but can you see maybe a little bit looking at this, why they weren't ahead of Michigan in the overall talent this year? Because they've had a lot more player attrition. Northwestern always does a good job retaining its guys. Let's look at the programs. Nebraska has done a good job in the portal. They've lost a lot of guys, but they have brought some really good players in. Let's look at the teams, though, that had a lot of traffic in and out. Indiana lost the most transfers in our league so far this offseason at 34. They did bring in 13, including Connor Bazelak, the quarterback from Missouri. But then you look at Michigan State. They're known as kind of the other transfer portal U in our league. They only brought in 8 guys this year, Aaron, but lost 22, including losing Kenneth Walker. That could explain maybe when I told you I watched their spring game and I thought they looked a little small. All right. Anyway, looking at these numbers, what stands out to you?
I think, Iowa, obviously, that's astounding. And they just lost just one player. That's their Charlie Jones, the
And he's a
wide
heck of a
receiver,
player.
And he's a heck of a player.
Yeah.
Going to go to Purdue.
Man, you guys,
Yeah.
Purdue has you guys on tilt right now.
I swear. Tyrone Tracy and Charlie Jones are going to come into Kinnick Stadium this year and just run.
If they each have 70 catches in Purdue's offense, people are going to start hanging Brian Ferentz in effigy. All right?
And they should. Michigan and Iowa for the low number. We've already talked about Indiana. Maryland as well. That's kind of sticks out to me
I missed
as
Maryland.
well.
That's a lot of turmoil there.
But that's not exactly that surprising, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
given who the coach is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, nothing super surprising, I would say. Illinois, 18 out in his second year.
That's clearing out your roster.
Yeah.
Remember, he said last year, Bert said last year, I don't got enough guys that are good enough to play in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Just flat out said that.
Yeah, if you're an Illinois fan, you hope that's clearing out your roster. That's
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
That's true.
Other than that, Rutgers had a lot of attrition. Wisconsin is kind of average. Nothing super exciting stands out there.
All right. Finally, we are just about done with the academic year of sports. In fact, I think we are completed now with Big Ten baseball done. This school year, Michigan and Ohio State combined to win 21 of the 31 Big Ten championships awarded this academic year in men's and women's sports, Aaron. And if you look at the last 5 years, Michigan and Ohio State have combined to win 58% of all Big Ten championships awarded in all men's and women's sports over the last 5 academic years. Now, when you consider the amount of, everybody's making pretty much the same amount of money because of the equitable split that we have in the Big Ten. So I was very surprised to see those numbers, actually. What say you?
Congrats. No, this goes to show.
That's good.
This illustrates something.
It would have been funny if you would have left it there, actually. Yeah.
No, this illustrates something that we've talked about a few times on this. College football and college sports in general, they need their tent poles to survive. Okay? A league that's made up of Northwestern, Rutgers, even Iowa outside the Big Ten. Just name your small schools. They're not really going to be able to be solvent. Maybe just the football team would be, but they're not going to be able to be solvent without being in a conference. And the conference itself isn't going to be solvent unless you have huge brand name tent poles that are the rising tide that lifts all boats. And I think this is kind of indicative of that. You want your major brands to be successful because when your major brands are successful, the rest of the league gets to profit, essentially. And I think that's part and parcel to what we're talking about here.
And if you're one of those schools you mentioned like Iowa, you can't lose. I mean, you either win a Big Ten championship yourself or cash the check from the team that does. It's a win-win. There you go. All right, we'll come back and play our weekly game of Would You Rather here next. All right, time now for our game we play on Bigger Ten, known as Would You Rather. Aaron, this first one is for you. Would you rather bet Penn State, these are the actual odds right now, by the way. Would you rather bet Penn State plus 1,400 or Michigan State plus 2,500 to win the Big Ten?
I would rather bet Penn State.
And of course, we're talking football, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. In case we had
I
to
would
signify that.
I would rather bet Penn State. I wouldn't bet on either. But if you told me you have to bet on one of these, I think Penn State probably still has, just based on what we've seen so far this year, probably has the better chance. But as you can see from those odds, it's not a great chance. This one is for you. I had the same idea before I even saw what you sent over. I had the same idea because win totals are out now too.
Yeah.
Nebraska and Iowa have the same win total. Would you rather bet, and we're talking about overs here, would you rather bet Iowa over 7.5 or Nebraska over 7.5?
That reminds me, I forgot to send you I have the annual list I do every year predicting what the win totals will be.
Oh, yeah.
So sorry to do this live on the air.
Sure.
But remind me to send that to you, and that'll be next week's episode of Michigan Podcast as we go through, because I'm usually really good at guessing the market. This is a tough one.
I would go Nebraska.
Because the Nebraska number looks like they're begging you to bet the under based on what they've done here the last few years, right?
Yep.
I mean, it looks like they're begging you to bet the under. But Iowa is clearly the superior, more consistent team and program. I think I'll go with I'd rather. This is tough.
I think here's
I'm
the way.
I'm gonna say Iowa, but barely. Okay.
Here's the way I think about this. With Iowa this season, there's a lot more variance to the
yes.
The floor is lower than Nebraska's ceiling is tall.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And I know it's weird, and I know that you guys have had Matt Campbell's number, but you got to think sooner or later he wins this game, right? If he's any kind of coach.
Yep.
And I actually like Nebraska getting Oklahoma. I think might win the Big 12 again, even in Brett Venables' first year. But getting them at home, you played them very well on the road last year. You know, it's a new coaching staff, still getting their feet wet. That's a great spot for Nebraska to get a nice early season win. You know what I'm saying? To kind of bolster. That's provided they don't friggin' melt down in Dublin though against Northwestern, right? Because if you commit dumb penalties, and who knows how good of players he has. But if you come in there making the kind of shoot yourself in the foot endless mistakes Nebraska did the last couple of years, you ain't beating Pat Fitzgerald like that, right? So that's the thing is that's why I was so concerned and struggle with that question, because of the way you described it. Iowa has the higher floor, Nebraska has the higher ceiling, right? And they have the same win total, and they're in the same division, you know. So there you go.
And the variance errs to the under for Iowa. The variance errs to the over for Nebraska.
All right, for you, would you rather bet Iowa, back to the Big Ten West, would you rather bet Iowa plus 2,500 or Minnesota plus 3,000 to win the Big Ten?
Minnesota plus 3,000. I think I'm not quite sure what to make of their defense quite yet. But I think with Kirk Straka coming back, I think their offense has a chance to be at least competent.
Tanner Morgan cannot be worse than he was last year.
Yeah, so I think I'd err on Minnesota's side for
okay.
this one. Final one. Would you rather bet Maryland under 5.5 or Northwestern under 4.5?
I think I'd rather bet Maryland under 5.5. Although I think this one's kind of close too. But I think I'd rather bet Maryland under 5.5 because of the division they're in. Even though I don't think Northwestern's personnel is very good, but the division they're in, and I think they play West Virginia in the non-conference early on too, that I just think that there's more variance there. So I'd
room
rather
for error though, taking the higher number, playing the under, because Northwestern could spring an upset on anybody, and then your margin is gone.
Their non-conference schedule is pretty soft, and so if they just bet, they pull an upset or two in the conference, that under is gone. Where we've seen Maryland start 4-0 and finish 5-7, 4-8, right? Yeah. All right, that'll do it for this week's Would You Rather. We'll come back with our feedback of the week and Twitter poll results right after this. This week's Twitter poll results, I thought we'd do this by decade. I was going to go back to the 80s, but frankly, there weren't a lot of great Big Ten teams in the 80s, and they almost all would have been like Michigan teams and one Iowa team, and I thought that might get boring. So I started it in the 90s. Who was the best Big Ten football champion team of the 1990s? Penn State 1994, Ohio State 1996, or Michigan 1997? I thought this would be a lot closer, actually. You look at that Ohio State team in 96, I mean, you're talking about an absolutely loaded team. Went out and won the Rose Bowl on that drive by Joey Germain at the end against undefeated Arizona State. Penn State 94, maybe should have won the national championship. Went undefeated, didn't get it. It was awarded to Nebraska instead because they lost the number one ranking because they didn't cover the spread against Indiana in a game that they won by double digits. But the amount of pros on that Penn State team, absolutely ridiculous, the talent on that team. Kajana Carter, Kerry Collins, Bobby Engram, Kyle Brady, just an insanely talented team. And then that Michigan 97 team with that incredible schedule, Charles Woodson, that incredible defense. They won this poll going away. But I was surprised that vote wasn't closer than it was.
Yeah, I don't really have a bone in this fight because these are all when I was very, very, very young, sucking on my fingers young. But listening to you describe this, if you were to say pick one of these teams, I probably would have voted for Penn State.
I'd be totally fine with that. You want to talk about a great game, by the way. That Penn State 94 offense against that Michigan 97 defense, yikes. That'd be one hell of a football game. Let's get to this week's feedback of the week. Talking about the SEC wanting to break off on their own and why we'd have no problem with it. Raymond Bianchi writes, amen, and while we're at it, can't we just have our own playoff with the Pac-12 that culminates in the Rose Bowl? Sure. I mean, that's what college football was most of our lives growing up. A very regional sport that had a lot of debates and who was the best team out of the Pac-10, the best team out of the Big Ten, the best team out of the old Southwest Conference and SEC, and then every now and then maybe a Clemson out of the ACC. And then you have a big argument, and sometimes there wouldn't be a way to settle it. So teams would share the championship, and that debate would fuel, a lot of energy for the entire offseason. I've got the 9 bowl games on New Year's Day. I miss those days. I wouldn't have a problem going back to that at all.
I know. Yeah, it feels New Year's Day actually feels very
anticlimactic now,
barren, and it's not something you look forward to from a football. I mean, unless you've got a dog in the fight somewhere on one of those games, it just seems, like I said, it seemed like a miniature version of one of the first couple of days of the NCAA tournament in basketball, where there's a lot of excitement and a lot of meaning. Not so much now.
All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Bigger Ten. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, 5-star review, share, whichever applies, and whichever way you watch, like here on YouTube, or listen, like on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play, and help us to find more Big Ten sports fans just like you. You can also keep up to date. The deadline is looming for Big Ten players to decide whether or not they will enter the NBA draft. That's actually this week, and then you'll see a whole flurry of activity in the transfer portal after that. So we'll get a better idea of Big Ten basketball rosters here soon. Keep up to date with our thoughts on that and a lot more when you follow us on Twitter at Bigger Ten. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Dace. We'll see you next time right here at Bigger Ten.